Hello and welcome to this week's CENTCOM broadcast. This past week, the Lord has spoken really clearly to Bob about leaders on the tops of the mountains and how they're affected by hope prayer and hope hearing. So in this CENTCOM, he shares from a dream that the Lord gave him on what those leaders experience and the tools and the steps that they need to take to go deeper into hope in God. Enjoy the broadcast and stay tuned afterwards for some exciting announcements.
Good to see you. You got nice glasses. Okay, prayer and proclamation time, Isaiah 42:13. It says, "The Lord shall go forth like a mighty man. He shall stir himself up in his zeal. Like a man of war, he shall cry out, and he shall prevail against our enemies. He'll shout aloud. Again, the Lord will come forth like a mighty man. He'll stir up his zeal like a man of war. He shall cry out and prevail against his enemies," or your enemies. It's a great study to look at the point where God gets to when he says that's enough, and he fights for his people. And so we have been proclaiming the God of hope through faces of God, particular faces of God, as the Redeemer, and where he redeems situations. Let's turn all phones up. Supplier, builder, wise God. We proclaimed who God is in these faces. Well, now we have a time we're entering into, and so I want to set this for our prayer time, and us to be asking questions as I share this stream, that this is really important. Where we're headed is just really a seminal dream. Sometimes you have once in a lifetime dreams, and I feel that weight to it. Have not processed it all the way through, and it was really in 4 parts. So I won't develop out all parts this morning, but we'll share enough that you can even have a pause, Jeff sing a song, and us proclaim into it together. And our model is to appropriate, to acknowledge, and so you just think about how we can do that as I share with you. But I'm going to focus on this prayer and proclamation. The Lord woke me up with his face. Philippians 1:8 and 9, I was praying before I went to bed. It was that I'd bound in love and all discernment. And then he woke me up with this Isaiah 42:13 and said, now really, I have love after you. And I have discernment on how to help you. And I have discernment on how you're to help one another. And so I felt this man of war and this zeal for me. That's a great feeling. Great feeling. So then he takes me to a scene that shows me part 1. And part 1 of this dream is really the hope need. The hope need. And he takes me to the base of a mountain. And I'm there, and we've led a lot of people up to the tops of different mountains, which we've really encouraged as a ministry to go to the top of a mountain of business. And we really aren't a ministry, we're an organization. There's a distinction, and we'll make it another time. But as an organization to help lead people in all they're called to be, to go to the tops of these mountains and really bring the influence of God and the nature of God. The nature of God. So in this dream, we're leading them to the tops of the mountains. And one of them was Grant Curtis, and Grant David Cunningham, and Jeremy Willer, some others that are in Hollywood, Stephen Baldwin, Justin Bieber. I've been encouraging them about going to the top of the mountain. Not as much Justin, because there's a preparation to take that mountain. That mountain is a challenging mountain, obviously, in Hollywood. So I have others and there's numbers of others that we've talked to. So in the dream, Grant, who I've known as from a baby, he was the department head in my university's son. I was very, very close to the department head. Best friends with him and Mitch Wheeler. Started a business together. But his son, so his son, has always really, really trusted me. And very vulnerable, very honorable, although he's second in Hollywood, they say. He's just got a unique innocence about him, an unpretentiousness that I've rarely tasted of on the earth. And so he was looking at me because when we got up there, I took his glasses from him. And he had these Coke bottle thick glasses. And I took them because I didn't think with others, they'd be sufficient for the next part of the journey. It was like Jeremiah 15:17, your sheep being slaughtered. Jeremiah 50:25, he's got another level of an arsenal for you. So I take away his coat glasses, which really represented his ability to see God in the situation in everyday life and how God was working in the midst of challenges. Second, he had hearing aids, and I took away his hearing aids because they were old, like my mother's hearing aids. She just doesn't work, lots of static. And so I thought it was helping him. Then the third thing is I took away his body armor. And I went down the hill, and I got with others that were going to help these ones go to the tops of the mountains. It included us, many of us. And what happened at the bottom of the mountain was there were people that were leaders that were not sure of their place with one another. You know, it's been discussions John Swart and I have had about who is John Swart over the next 5 years. Is he general manager? Is he builder out, architect of all new areas? Who is Elaine Hart in the next season? Is she drill sergeant for us in these areas, but very kind in this area and that area? I mean, because you got to have that. You got to have policies and rules that are followed, but done kindly. And so we're looking at each, and we're looking at, well, who is John Shore, and so that's what was happening at the base of the mountain. You know, I met over the weekend with Jeremy Jan, about 6 groups of people, just to say, who are you? What's your heart wire for Blake and Amy Ann, different ones, and it was a wonderful time, wonderful, relaxed, hopeful time, and everybody's so willing, because this stream, gave me an urgency. Because what happened was, while we were figuring it out down there, it wasn't a negative thing. But I will tell you a second thing that is negative, it's important to bring in. That is something we need to pray for. Well, not about us, but there was other leaders that disagreed down there at the bottom of the hill about the nature of God. So they wouldn't agree on what eyeglasses to give the people. And I just had this experience in New York where I shared about the nature of God, and I had the leaders of a couple of movements you would know about, and they stood up and they challenged me. Well, he's a God of vengeance. He's going to, bring a Holocaust, and he's going to judge people and this way and that way. And they're not all of what they're saying is not untrue. It's not that example, but the hermeneutical balance, I don't want to get into all of it, but I was able to get with them and with John for a little bit, and then talk to them later and say, well, let's look at those scriptures. And let's really, because you're talking about my Father, and you're talking about the way he represents himself in his hope and his love, and how he even disciplines, and what he judges and what he doesn't judge. And he came to seek to save the lost, not judge the world, and Jesus' perfect theology. So he said, let's look at the nature of Jesus. Let's look through the Old Testament. Let's really mine those out, because there's 4 other scriptures about that subject. And so I don't know everything, but I've done my homework a measure a lot. And so, and spent a lot of time on my knees. So it says in 1 John, fathers, you should know me. You should have an essence, a sense, that is me or that's not me. So the leaders couldn't agree on the eyeglasses, how they were to see God. People were to see God in that time. Well, they were to see God that was judging them for this, or they were to see God that, was trying to break through, like for Daniel, and it took 3 weeks to break through for Daniel's behalf against the prince of Persia in Daniel 9. And Daniel could have felt that he was being judged. No, God was fighting through some pretty strong demonic strongholds in that area. So the leaders were not agreeing on the eyeglasses. They weren't agreeing on the hearing aid. There was a charismatic model, and then there was a kingdom model of hearing. And so they weren't agreeing completely, and they weren't agreeing on the body armor. And it was just the importance of people was the body armor was really, the body armor represented, you would think, Ephesians 6:12, but it wasn't that. It was really like the water buffaloes that back up and protect one another, was the importance of one another. And this has kind of become public with, I'm going to say it in general terms, not apply it, but I was in a situation, I was involved where, close to a person, I said, do you need me? And they said, no, I like you, but I don't really need you. And that wounded my heart. It was, I wanted you to need me. I want to feel, I feel alone, and so there is a reality where we really do need each other. And so I need to be needed. I need to, and not codependent, but I need to be interdependent, not independent with people. And so for the first 12 years of my faith, was really encouraged on a vertical relationship with God that has been invaluable. But if it was alone what I got fed on, then the reality of community and the expression of the hand and the foot and loving the other gifts would not have unfold. So that was the first stream, was the hope need. And what happened was, why those ones were up at the tops of those different mountains, whether political, educational, and I saw the ones that were trying to ascend that mountain and take that territory and really represent and bring forth the nature of God so he would be honored and loved. There was an army down in this valley, and they were like a stealth army. And they were sliding through the trees, and they had the most sophisticated weaponry, and they captured the people, and captured Grant, and captured others, and it would have been better that they creamed them. But they took them in, they started to torture them with such hopelessness. And so the dream ends. Part 2 happens a couple days later, because I dreamed part 1 again the next night. And it's just the way the Lord has to embed things in my spirit when he wants it to be more real than life, and me not just move on to the next thing. So part 2 happens a few days later, and part 2 is all these people that had been in the tops of the mountains, and even people in this room, that were lined up, and they were going through an admissions director. And this admissions director was looking at their dossier or their resume, and they were saying whether they were able to be accepted into this class. And the class, over the door, it had the class of useful information. And it was like the hope solutions for them, the hope journey for them. And I knew there'd be an interdependent learning, but an independent learning. And it'd be really profound and deep. The research of an individual and what caused them to be hopeless or hope-filled, and what caused them to see the true nature of God and really advance at the deepest heart levels. And so I thought, if you got admitted to this class, it was the highest of highest privileges. And so there was people that walked up, and I'm standing behind the admissions director, and I'm thinking that this person's not going to be approved. I'm not judgmental. I'm just looking at the dossier, and I'm looking at what is acceptable to enter into this class. And what would happen is some people would have to go back into line 2 or 3 times, but everybody was accepted. Because he would, and it was Jesus, was the admissions director, and I just saw a silhouette of him. And he would give them criteria of how they would have to lay it out, accept a new attitude. And here were the things that he really liked to want. He said, you're not accepting your greatness. So you got to go to the end of the line and figure out if you will accept your greatness or not. He said, I have premium in you. And you only get premium gas for one reason, is if you need more horsepower. That's the only reason you get premium gas. It's just the truth. So he said, one, to some, you're not accepting that I want to put premium gas in you, greatness, so you can have more horsepower. And so they go back to the end of the line. And then, I had to go to the back of the line a couple of times for different reasons. Then, third, he said, I got to believe to some that you care about my heart and that you care about my future. and you desire to do this with friends. And so he sent them to the back of the line to consider that. Then he said, to some, they were like the mailman my dad knew that had to put down the baggage to jump over the fence. I've told that story. And it was just they had some baggage. And he said, you're going to have to put down your bags. You can't get into this class, and you can't really understand the information if you don't put down the baggage. You'll see it and understand it through the wrong filters. So for some, he said that. And then he said to others, you got to accept. It was redirection or re-education. He said you've had encoded in your theology realities that you don't even perceive. And he said, so you're going to have to perceive I'm doing a new thing. And so he sent him to the back of the line. And he said, and you're going to have to be ready to be retooled. And you're going to have to be ready to be repositioned. And so they would go to the back of the line, and it was all hopeful. It was like they're going to see their greatness, they're going to see their gaps. It was kind of the first level of assessment that would get them in there, and all they had to do was be willing. And when he would stamp somebody, he'd just turn, and they were approved, and I'd say, why? And he'd say, willing. They're willing. Yeah. So it wasn't like they had achieved in all those areas. And then he said, you must see the God of hope. You know, that, and it's not just for us, but he said, in order for you to come up with the Joseph plan, it's an updated Joseph plan to save nations. In order for you to come up with answers and believe for Libya, he named some nations and wrote it down. Egypt, New Zealand, some other nations. And he said, for the 500-mile radius around Kansas City, to be like Nehemiah's, he said, you've got to have the God of hope and feel like Isaac in a famine. You can prosper. You got to feel like Joseph. You can come up with a plan in the middle of drought. You can feel like you can come up with a plan like Daniel did for the king. So then he stamped to accept it on people, and he moved them into the classroom. The classroom was profound. I saw people go from hopeless negative cycles, and they were broken, into hope-filled cycles. It was wonderful. Now, the contract had been made clear. So I submit this to you because everyone was called to make a contract, a commitment with him before they entered into the class. So I just ask you on a personal level to evaluate that and see if that criteria speaks to you, or if there's some other criteria that speaks to you. But then we got into the classroom. What happened in the classroom was one thing had not been decided, and for some reason he allowed everybody into the classroom and had this as an object lesson, and it was the first object lesson within the classroom. And it was the reality of David and Uriah. And he was emphasizing the need for marvelous camaraderie and the preferring of one another in this hope-filled journey. It was just so important to him. Let me explain this to you. I've never understood this. And somebody who had listened to Bill Johnson said, I told him about it, and they said he used that verse almost the same way. That in the Proverbs, it says, and I got to find out exactly where, but it says a man with skill will come before the king. But the next verse says, put a knife to your throat if you're a man of self-gratification or you eat too much. So it was like people would get into this class, and this was the highest form of learning, and they could walk out as the miracle men and women and be independent and have some real power and authority, because they were going to gain such skill. But if they turned it into self-gratification, and I've just had this happen. Well, I have friends close to me, and I'll start to climb the ladder or something like that, or a pair to climb the ladder, and then all of a sudden they're using you for their own self-gratification. Get a place for my girlfriend, pay for a radio spot, all that kind of, it might be well-intentioned people, but it isn't Now, David and Uriah, there's two applications he gave me. One was the king using people and then discarding them and sucking everything out of them, and then them becoming speed bumps and being in the way. In that classroom, so the kings had to decide, I'm here for the sake of the people. It's like William Wallace said. Are the nobles here for the... are we here to serve the nobles? Are the nobles here to serve the people? It was profound the way he said it. I wish I could quote it exactly right. But it was really those who were kings and queens would have to make a decision to lay down their lives and not to go after self-gratification. Then God would love them and build them up and bless them in the journey. But it was also for the people not to use the kings, not to use them up, and one another would be kings in skill where you put a knife to your throat. You know, we'll have people come into our house and they'll just go right to your refrigerator, eat all the food. They don't say thank you. They don't ask. They don't, you know, it's just that kind of attitude that doesn't appreciate what it takes to do that, to fill that refrigerator. What it takes to, you know, I'd gladly give it, but it just, you know, are other people that are coming in this week even that want to meet with me because they want me to support their ministry, but it's in... And they don't know me, and there's a difference. It's okay sometimes, but I'm speaking from personal experience. You know, I'm not, and I love people, and people. We do want to open doors for people. We don't have time to qualify. You know, I say to some where I can just see their hearts right. Tell me what you need immediately, because I just know they're in it to love God and serve God in the way they're called, and if we can help once, then that's right. So sometimes these need to be qualified, these matters, but I just ask you to consider it. What's it mean to put a knife to your throat? And for it not to turn into your self-gratification, but really that Jacob value is real. That we do things out of the love of others. And that Jacob for 7 years served, and then it ended up 14, out of the love of others. But also, what's it mean for kings not to use people up and discard them? That's a great evil. And you don't look at people because here's where you're going to have great compassion and hope for people is if there's a leader that has done that, well, you say, well, what hurt them along the way? Why would they operate out of that versus getting on their back? I mean, a lot of them have had so many hits in private that you don't know about, that they're abusive to people, not meaning to be, but they got so abused. So you don't, it's not to be used as a hammer so in the class, there was one of the best facilitators I'd ever seen. His name was Jesus. That would go into the depths of why people use one another, or why people, and unknowingly, insensitively, and how they had been taught, and he would decode their encoded philosophies and their understandings. It's the best class that I'd ever observed, and had the best results. And what came out of it was a symphony of hope, a great symphony of hope. So I would just ask you to ask the Lord, what does it take for you to be accepted in the class? And what's it take also, as you get in the class, to just go to the deeper levels of learning, like I've been doing understanding your negativity cycle. I've been going into Gutman and Smith. They're Christian solving perpetual problems. And if this thing doesn't dig deep into the root of why you do the things that you do, you know, it's just quantitative research that's been done over and over, and it's not easy to go through. And why do I do what I do? But I know if I don't go into that classroom, I won't have a healthy respect for others, understanding for one another. I won't have hope in the long term for them. And so I know this is part of my education in this class of useful information. And everybody was given the book of hope. And so it was a hope-filled learning. And there was self-assessment filled with hope, and people would shout insight. I got a real problem, and I just figured it out. And they could trust one another, not to use it as hammers, but to help each other. the third part, or fourth part of the dream, am I at third or fourth part? Third part of the dream was what we learned in the class, and I started to say it, and I'm not going to go into this real deep at this point because it's going to be unfolding truths. But we learned one, Isaiah 42:13, the face of God, that was a God that was going to war for us and that was going to help us to succeed in two ways: unconditional love and unconditional hope. And this unconditional love was applying love or not getting anything in return. And John Schwartz said it like that, and it was the way it was defined in that classroom. And it was really right. And the unconditional hope was continually keeping the promises, always being a keeper of the promises and not moving into the disappointment room ever, not letting it get attached to you. It was an amazing room. The power of that room for people to be vehicles of the promises, promise keepers all the days of their life. And people were becoming champions. They were going from, again, that hopeless pattern of negativity to a hope-filled pattern. The analysis was bringing people into the most beautiful analysis and answers. We're bringing people into the most beautiful silver lining behind every cloud. Silver lining of hope behind every cloud. And then it was obviously able to touch families, cities, nations in a radiant way. So I saw next, who was in the classroom. I saw who had been led to the mountain and hurt, left up there. I saw my older brother, that I believe got led to the top of the mountain. I saw Jimmy Baker. I got led to the town. I saw some from Bethel. Saw some from HIM. I think that's Jayan's network. I talked to a few yesterday. But there was a way in this room to heal them. And I believe we're going to get an opportunity. I believe a number of them are going to come here and come to the gatherings. So it's never promoting a ministry. It's just being faithful with the stewardship of a message. So putting on your links, putting on your Facebook, because this raft of, throwing out a life raft, and I've dreamed it many times, where people would be hopeless, and we'd throw out the life raft, and we'd tow them in. They come into a classroom. Now it's a classroom, was a Hope Reformers classroom. It's the same classroom, it just happens to be the season it's in. This classroom of the Book of Useful Information and the Book of Hope, or the class of useful information of the Book of Hope, it really is going to heal a lot of kings and queens that are going to rule in areas, whether they're mothers, grandmothers, or other areas, or young people that are going to rule at a young age. Mike Taylor, sophomore. Amy Ann was president of Daniel Academy, then Jed was, and now Taylor, and sophomore, is vice president, and they would have voted her president, but they couldn't have sophomore. And they had her give the speech this morning. It's not about my children at all. I think that there is a process that's happening that brings the purposes to bring the best out of people and brings them to the forefront of what they're gifted and called to be. And whether they were or weren't, that doesn't matter. I just saw her just stand up and have this hopefulness that people want to follow, And so I believe we're being invited into that reality ourselves, So John Schwartz comment took a little while on that, and we're actually use this as a set column because it's important, because the next I'll go into more private, personal information. I might send to the 1,700 churches at Bethel, here, you guys were in this room, and this is really, how you moved into hope, out of hopeless negative patterns if they had them. I'm not saying that. I might say something, if it's invited. I'm not going to intrude if it's not invited, But, and I think we get to ask the question. I'm not intruding in anybody's house. But if we get invited, to ask the questions, I always give Kevin permission. I mean, Kevin comes to our house, and we had such a relationship that, I just give him anything, and he'd give me anything, So he's been a cupbearer to me in so many ways. I don't ever think Kevin's going to come in and take advantage and turn it into his agenda, and even if he did, it'd be right. I just trust Kevin, believe in Kevin and what he's about. So there's a real love and belief and camaraderie, and I know I'm getting my back covered. I know I cover his back, and I know that's all of us in this room to a certain measure. I just believe as we walk in that room, there's going to be such a greater grace for that to happen on a deep level, quickly, with understanding. And the right interdependence happens, so people don't get up on the top of the mountains and get creamed, Because we're asking people, like I met with Jeremy and Jana yesterday, and I said, Jeremy, I'm asking you to ascend this mountain to understand how to get the message out on a broad level. And I said, because the people need it in Europe, hope message, and the God of hope in the right way. Now, Jeremy's going to run into some, kickback from the cynics. Maybe not. It might not be aimed at him. But Kevin and I did when we got up in Europe and spoke, or I did, and Kevin really took care of it. The newspaper headlines that said this and that was negative about me, because I'm bringing hope. So I said, okay, well, tell me how you've done better. Tell me your way, and let's look at how it works. So people love misery at times. People love to panic. People don't love to build and just be hopeful. It's just a drug. It's intoxication. In the base nature of a human being, they've been encoded with that. That doesn't mean they can't get free of it, but the kingdom of God is our standard, and it's righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. And if we live outside of that, then we're really not looking into the Word appropriately. So, doesn't minimize challenges, maximizes God. So, John Swart, any comment?
Thank you for joining us for this week's CENTCOM broadcast. This week we encourage you to check out the brand new Hope Hearing Journal on bobhartley.org in our web store. This journal allows you to ask questions of the Lord about what's on His heart for leaders, for your own life, for those that you love, for your day-to-day activities. So bless you. Have a wonderful week.